I recently reviewed a book of posters printed at Whittington, a superb collection of the early poster printing work of the Whittington press. But that work did not stop in 1996, and by 2013, enough new examples had been accumulated to justify a second book, Posters from Whittington 1996 to 2013, and that's the book I'll be looking at today. Just like the previous book, this one was issued in 3 states, and here I'll be looking at one of the special B editions. And just by putting the 2 books side by side, a couple of big differences are immediately apparent. Firstly, this newer edition is substantially smaller than the older one. And secondly, the slipcase in which the earlier book came has been replaced by this kind of chemise folio with these ribbon ties. So let's take a closer look at this 2013 edition to see what's going on inside. The folio case is half bound in this brown canvas-like cloth and covered in this laid salmon pink paper. It's normally secured by these golden ribbon ties, and unfastening them allows us to open the portfolio and reveal the book inside. Unlike a slipcase, this type of folio leaves the top and bottom edges of the book exposed and provides therefore a little bit less protection. The book follows the same design language as the folio, so we have a half cloth binding in brown over these salmon pink paper sides, and the front board is printed with a lino cut by Francis Randle. On the spine of the book is a leather title label that simply reads in gilt, "A Book of Posters." The top edge of the text block is trimmed, and the bottom and 4 edges are left untrimmed. Opening the book, we first arrive at end papers, which again use this salmon pink stock, and then at the main paper, which is a Zircal carton bouton mould-made paper. It's very heavy weight, and it has a slightly rough, almost felt-like texture, which gives it a nice tactile quality. Altogether a fairly nice paper. The half title has this small engraving by Helmuth Weisenborn, and then we reach the title spread, where in the place of a frontispiece, we have our first poster. One nice thing about this poster is that it's printed on a fairly old, circa 1900 paper, which came from the Oxford University Press. One can see some spotting here, which are signs of its age, and it has a fairly nice antique texture to it. Facing that frontispiece is the title page. As usual, when they want to show off, the Whittington Press have brought out their large Caslon swash. Otherwise, it's a fairly standard title page. The book has a short 2-page introduction with a nice drop cap there, again I believe by Helmuth Weisenborn, and some text by John Randle and Patrick Randle about poster printing at Whittington, and then a list of the posters. This list includes all 34 posters from the A state of this edition. We have an asterisk next to 4 of them to indicate that they are not included in this B state, so the B state had a still generous 30 posters. And then we go right into the posters themselves, and they are presented in a very similar format to the previous poster book. So on the verso page, we have some text that provides bibliographic information on each poster and also an account of the poster's production. I think it's fair to say that that text is generally a little bit more detailed than we saw in the previous edition. Most of the posters in this book have been reprinted from the originals, and on occasion some minor emendations have been made, and they are always noted in the text. Also, in many cases, it was necessary to reprint on different papers to those used for the originals, and again, details of that have always been provided. So now I will leaf through the posters and we'll get to see them all, and I will pause to comment perhaps on a few of my personal favourites. Here we see, I think, a very classic example of Whittington poster making that is relatively plain and relies on a tasteful use of colour, beautiful setting of type to carry the poster. This poster is a nice example of Poquoir work by Miriam McGregor. So the illustration here has been created by hand colouring through a series of stencils, as McGregor also did in a number of Whittington Press editions, like Newcastle, A House by the Sea, Ernest Dowson, A Bouquet. This poster, I suppose, is the first of my favourites. It is printed on a nice grey zircon paper. Here we see, I think, one of the sacrifices that comes with the slightly smaller format compared to the previous poster book. So the previous poster book's large format meant that whenever posters were folded, they would open out within the book's own surface. Whereas in this smaller format, we have a number of posters that fold instead out into the void beyond the book. And I think I like that a little bit less. And if we open it out, we see that we have this nice line drawing by Henri Matisse. It's a fairly plain poster in some respects, but I think its austerity also gives it a nice elegance, so I quite enjoyed this one. This is an engraving that we saw a few weeks ago when I reviewed The English Scene by John O'Connor. Some of the posters, or one might call them broadsides, are much simpler than the more elaborate ones. Here's another nice example of Miriam McGregor's engraving work. This poster is types from presses which served as the frontispiece for Whittington's edition, Pages from Presses 1. And it's quite nice to have that reproduced here, showing examples of the different types that were used by some of the founders of the private press movement. This poster is nice because it's a very rich demonstration of typography. We have different sizes of Caslon going on here. We have small caps, we have two-colour printing, again wood engravings by Helmuth Weissenborn, so there's quite a lot of typographic richness going on there. Here we have an example of the illustration work of Vance Gerry. This poster is printed on a fairly nice, quite tactile Bougra Bouton mould-made paper. Here we have this very large lino cut by Andrew Anderson, which featured in his book for the Whittington Press, titled A Vision of Order. And like most of Anderson's work, it shows the influence of his time working as an architect in church renovation projects. Some of the posters like this one display some wry humour. A nice thing about this poster again is the paper. So this one is printed on an antique Rivers mould-made paper and also has some nice examples of small caps Caslon in use there. Here we have a poster that's printed on this distinctive Wookie whole paper, which is very thick and feels almost like an egg carton in this bold red colour, and the text here is printed in red, which is an interesting design touch. This is perhaps my favourite poster in the whole book. So again, another very large, impressive lino cut, this time by Geoffrey Miller. And this poster is printed on this quite nice, very thin and lightweight Korean handmade paper. Here's another example of Andrew Anderson's lino cut work, again from his edition of A Vision of Order. I believe this is the largest poster in the book. Here is another poster printed on a delightful antique example of paper recovered from the Oxford University Press. That was truly a treasure trove. This is a poster advertising the Whittington Press edition of Pastoral, which collects some wood engraving work by Lucien Pizarro. So I read that book recently, and you can look forward to a review of that on this channel quite soon. And this poster is printed on the bachelor's otter paper, which was used for the A-state of that particular edition. It's another very nice antique English paper from the early part of the 20th century. This is another poster with a bit of humour about it. It riffs off of the famous monologue from Trainspotting, but now with a typographic theme. Choose letterpress, we are encouraged. This is another poster which uses this heavy Wookiee whole paper that again is wonderfully tactile. I can't stress enough that one of the real pleasures of these books is not only the variety of poster design work on display, but the very rich variety of papers that we get to experience firsthand by leafing through the book. That brings us to the end of the posters. Of course, the book ends as usual with a colophon bearing some production design and editioning details. And that is posters from Whittington 1996 to 2013. I hope you enjoyed the review. Since I posted my last review, this channel just surpassed 1,000 subscribers for the first time. So thank you very much to everybody who subscribed to the channel and helped to make that happen. And if you're not subscribed yet, please do consider subscribing for more regular book videos of this nature.